Legion of Merit with 2 oak leaf clusters, the Distinguished Flying Cross, the Meritorious Service Medal, and the Air Medal with 4 oak leaf clusters. Major General Kunkel has been married for 38 years to his lovely wife, Jenny, and they have 4 children. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor and privilege to present our speaker this morning, Major General Joseph D. Kunkel.
To say how many flying hours, because my brother always teases me that I only have like 2,800 flying hours. So next time I'll make sure that doesn't get in the bio. All right. Hey everyone, good morning, Hebron. How are y'all doing? It's so fantastic to be back here. So I know John has been asking me to do this for a number of years, and we've made it happen this time. So thanks, John. And John, I appreciate all the work that you've done over the years putting on this ceremony. I know when I was growing up, a Memorial Day service outside the courthouse on Memorial Day was something that was just part of this town. I know you carried on that tradition. So let's give John a round of applause. The national anthem was brilliant. You know, if Mrs. Pfeiffer were here, I think she would say the honor guard, I tell you what, you can take the men out of the service, but you cannot take the service out of the men. What a fitting tribute to our nation, fitting tribute to our flag. So thank you so much to the honor guard. I know we had to make an early morning call to change the location to this place, but I think it probably worked out for the best for us. So thanks everyone who had a part in setting this thing up. I know it doesn't just come together. You know, it comes together through a team, so thanks to everyone for that. Hey, so when I was putting together this speech, which is going to be a little bit longer than Chaplain Forrest's, but when I was putting this together this morning, I'm like, Steve, do you have a 3-ring binder I can put this in? He says, no, I don't, but I got this binder, and it says The Journey. And I was like, wow, The Journey, that is fitting. Because when I think about the last time I spent a significant amount of time in this town, it was 35 years ago, and it's been a heck of a journey since then. And, you know, my wife and I got married in Grace Lutheran Church 30 years ago, and since that time we've had an incredible life in our Air Force. You know, we've got 4 kids. We've got 2 down in Fort Worth, Texas. We've got 1 in Boise, Idaho, who closed on a house on Thursday. They're building nests. We're thinking grandkids might be in our future sometime soon. And then we've got another son who's out in Portland, Oregon. And in those 30 years or 35 years since we've left here, Jenny and I have moved 15 times. So do the math on that, about once every 2 years. And we've lived in all kinds of different places all over the world. We're currently living in the heart of Washington, D.C., which is always fun, living in the middle of a swamp. And I think that, you know, the grass doesn't grow well in our yard. And I think it's because we are literally in the swamp. But we've been stationed in many incredible places. We've been all over the world. We've been in England. We spent a year over in Jordan. We spent a couple assignments in Alaska. We've been all over this United States. But none of those places give us the feeling that we feel when we come here, when we come home. So it is fantastic to be back here. And it's fantastic to be celebrating Memorial Day with some true patriots, and those are the folks that we have in this town. So I've had an amazing career in the Air Force, something I could not have even dreamed of 30 years ago. You know, I was a small town kid who looked up and saw airplanes flying south of town at Degenhardt's farm, and said, man, wouldn't it be fun to do that? And I never could have imagined that the career that I would have in the Air Force was as good as it's been. But I will tell you, it's because of the foundation that was set in this town that I've been so successful. And any success that I have had over the last 35 years, I can attribute to the lessons that I learned in this town. This town is fantastic. So things like hard work, duty, integrity, service, excellence, and kindness, those are all foundational for success. And I learned those very early in life in Hebron, Nebraska. Small towns get it. Small towns provide the tools. Small towns provide the tools for success, but sometimes I don't think small towns give themselves as much credit as they deserve for the successes of the citizens and the success they have in those towns. You know, small towns know hard work, and my life, like many of you, has been filled with hard work. And you know, I was talking to my brother, there's no harder worker on this earth than my brother Steve Kunkel. You know, he will have a meeting in Denver, the next day he'll have a meeting in Lincoln, then he'll have a meeting in Florida, and the next day you'll see him up on a roof. Nobody works harder than him. But we were reflecting on what taught us hard work. One, it was good parents, but two, it was all of you. It was Miss Baden saying, hey, I got another homework assignment for you. It was Mr. Hill telling us to run a couple more laps during football practice. It was those things, but it was also the expectation that as kids, you're going to show up at the courthouse before sunrise and hop on a bus and go detassel some corn in cornfields. It was a thought that, you know, you were going to show up at a soybean field right at sunrise and cut weeds or pull weeds if the farmer wanted you to pull them instead of cutting them. And you would, you know, rogue soybean fields all day long, or hauling bales, or carrying bundles of shingles up ladders, or tinning barns. I mean, hard work is something that this community teaches. And I would suggest that, you know, hard work is the key to success. And these are normal activities for kids in Nebraska. And it leads to success in any venture, whether that is farming, whether that is owning a small town bank, or whether that is being a senior defense official in our federal government. So, hey, we also know that in a small town, things get done because everyone contributes. All right, many of our first responders in this town only exist through the means of volunteers, okay? Our fire department is an example. Volunteer fire department. Without volunteers, it doesn't exist. Everyone contributes in a small town. When there's a funeral of a veteran, it's volunteers from the American Legion and VFW that honor the fallen, and they do an incredible job of it. And Jenny and I were back in Dessler 2 weeks ago. Unfortunately, Jenny's uncle Leroy passed at the age of 95. He led a fantastic life. He was a Korean War veteran. The American Legion Honor Guard performed solemn rites at his burial, including a 21-gun salute and the playing of taps. The final salute to a veteran. And it was perfect. And I will tell you, even though it was at the Dessler ceremony, the Dessler Cemetery, it was just as meaningful as any Arlington National Cemetery service performed by active duty soldiers. And the community sprang into action to ensure that the service was perfect, and it was. Small towns teach the value of service. You see it in this service. They teach the value of duty. It's the duty of everyone to contribute, and they teach the value of sacrifice. And my friends, I can tell you that the folks in this town know sacrifice. So when I joined the Air Force, 35 years ago, almost to the day, and they told me that a core value of the Air Force was service before self, I said to myself, that's something that's already part of me, something that I witnessed my whole life by the citizens of Hebron. And I told myself at that time, hey, I can do this. This is just part of who we are. So I'll also tell you, patriotism is also taught here. I grew up in the glory days of Hebron's Big Bang 4th of July celebration. Do we still do that? Is it as good as it used to be? Because I tell you what, it used to be fantastic. What a fantastic time. Patriotism, pride in our community, pride in our country, always abundant. The community injected patriotism into our consciousness with parades, car shows, the water hose fight with the bucket that was on the string. That thing was incredible. I was never old enough to actually participate, but I always wanted to. The mud volleyball, bake sales, and then finally ending it with the fireworks display put on by the volunteer firefighters, right? Teaching the basics of patriotism. That's small town. That's Americana. And that's what small towns do, okay? They teach you to be patriots. They teach you the value of America. And about a month ago, I was in D.C., and I was actually at a dinner with Don Trump Jr., I know, name dropping, but I met a guy there, his name was Sham Shakar. And Sham is the Chief Technology Officer for a company called Palantir. You may have heard of Palantir. It's a huge software company, highly successful, worth about $300 billion. And Sham, it's an Indian name. Sham was born in Mumbai, India, in the early 70s. He's about my age. And he and his family immigrated to the United States in the very early 80s. And he was relaying a story about great American movies. And he said, hey, when I got to America, I learned about America through great American movies. And I'm like, oh yeah, Sean, what movies are you talking about? And he's like, well, movies like Rocky IV, where you had Ivan Drago, the Soviet fighter, and Rocky beat the heck out of him, you know, in Top Gun, in Iron Eagle, okay, all these great American movies, and movies like the movie Firefox. And he's like, hey, in those days, we knew who the bad guys were, and we weren't afraid to say it. This is coming from an Indian immigrant, right? But a true American patriot. And he said, hey, in those days, we knew who the bad guys were, we weren't afraid to say it. We also know who the good guys were. And they were us. And we weren't afraid to shout it. We weren't afraid to shout it. And we weren't afraid to have a movie that was released in the United States that said, we know who the bad guys are, those guys over there, and we know who the good guys are, they're us, and we're going to tell the whole world that we're the good guys. And Sean told me, he was reflecting on this, he said, hey, sometimes today, we're afraid to say who the bad guys are and who the good guys are. And he's like, and sometimes, in some places, people say that we are the bad guys. And they play to a foreign audience. And sometimes in those foreign audiences, America is portrayed as not the good guys, but the bad guys. It sounds like that is not who we are. And I'm certain that this community does not suffer from this delusion. And that in Hebron, we know who the good guys are. They're us. And we're not afraid to say it. Okay? We're patriotic, and we're not afraid to say it. We're patriotic, we're not afraid to have conversations like this. And the flags on Main Street as you drive into town communicate it, and they communicate that pride to everyone. And this ceremony is America at its best, right? This ceremony is teaching patriotism, and that is a great thing to teach our children, and that is what I was taught. Strong societies are proud societies, and in Hebron we also said the Pledge of Allegiance every day in school, and we stood tall in resolute silence when the national anthem was played. And it wasn't uncommon to see a yellow ribbon around a tree. American greatness is real. We should be proud of it and shout it out loud. And that's what I learned from Hebron, Nebraska. I learned patriotism, and it served me well throughout my entire career. And their schools and our churches taught us well too, what an impact they made. You know, I can remember every teacher from Mrs. Woolston in kindergarten, from when I was a little tyke, telling me that my jacket was dirty, to Mr. Fraser, you know, my senior calculus teacher, and all the coaches and teachers in between, many of whom are in the room, and it's so good to see you, and I'm still a little nervous. I'm proud of you. But they had a tremendous impact on me. And our church was also close, you know. My wife and I were married in Grace Lutheran Church. What an incredible close church we had. But it was a perfect environment to learn American values. And so these memories of Hebron that are so normal for this town that built me and they built you are not normal for everyone in this country, all right? But there's a sense of community here and a sense of community that just creates good people. And I'm so happy to share a few thoughts with you today. And so while this is a happy occasion of remembrance, it's also a solemn occasion, a day where we pay homage to those who did not come home. It's a day where we contemplate the heavy price of freedom, and you know, Kaplan talked about it earlier. We honor the fallen from America's wars. You know, since 1775, we have had 1.2 million soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen die in our nation's conflicts. Democracy is something that must be protected. The idea that individual citizens of a nation could select their own leaders was unheard of in the 1700s. Unheard of. Citizens selecting their own leaders, that doesn't make any sense. You know, leadership was the nobility. Leadership was kings. And the Great Democracy Experiment in 1776, which our founding fathers created, was an experiment back then, but it created the best country that's ever existed on the face of the planet, right? A nation that has enjoyed unheard of success and prosperity. But we're also a nation whose ideals are constantly under threat, and we must protect them. And it requires citizens like us who stand up, we raise our right hands, we repeat a vow to protect the Constitution, and we serve. All of you gave some, you know, as they say, some gave all. And you know who they are. And I'd ask that today we reflect on those we lost this year. You know, Hebron lost its last World War II veteran this last year with the passing of Jim Kenner. You know, Mr. Kenner was in the Navy in World War II. He came back home to Hebron after World War II, and he was recalled to active duty in the Navy during the Korean War and served again from 51 to 53. And then he came back to Hebron and served out the rest of his days here. But I remember Mr. Kenner as a stately, proud man, and as the mayor of our city and the leader of our bank. And like many veterans, his contributions to our nation and our community lasted well beyond his years in service. We also lost our own father this year, Tom Kunkel. You know, our dad, Tom, was a Marine. He attained the rank of sergeant, though he spent only 4 years on active duty, and I say only 4 years because he and I had this running joke that, you know, that I was a young punk and I didn't spend much time and he knew everything. But I'm like, Dad, you only spent 4 years in the military. I've been at 20 plus. But he reminded me every day that he was still a Marine until the day he passed on. You know, in the Vietnam War, he drove the on-toast anti-tank vehicle, and he was also a seagoing Marine on aircraft carrier USS Midway. And he was extremely proud of that. And that his service was something we celebrated constantly. You know, on his 70th birthday, he was so proud of his service that he got the Marine Corps symbol, the globe and anchor. He got it on his shoulder. And it was the biggest globe and anchor I've ever seen on a human. I don't know if any of you saw it. He wasn't afraid to show it to anyone, but he got that, you know, as on his 70th birthday. And though my dad's in heaven, he's a Marine to this day, and his ashes fittingly reside in a Marine Corps memory box with the word Semper Fi emblazoned on the side. Right? So this thing of service is still with us. This thing of service, even when we pass, is still going to be with us. So, and I'm certain those in the audience, you have loved ones. I'm sorry for your loss, but know that life in heaven is joyful, it's bliss, it's peaceful, it's everything we could ever want. And those folks that have moved on to the other side, they're out there having a party and they're waiting for us, and it's going to be great when we join them. So I want to shift our conversation real quick to the future, and I want to talk about, you know, you heard my duty title. I have no idea what that means. Something about force design and war game and integration and futures. But what I want to talk about is basically this means that I'm the head of the modernization efforts for the United States Air Force. All right, and I want to tell you what I've been up to. And this modernization story for the Air Force doesn't start in 2025. It actually starts back in 1980. And I'll just, if you guys will bear with me just for a couple of more minutes, I want to talk to you about what was going on in your United States Air Force in 1980. About the same time that many of us in this room, you know, Fangmeyer back here, as we were growing up in this small town and we were learning the lessons that we were learning, there was a lot of turbulence going on in the Air Force. The Air Force had just gotten back from the Vietnam War. In the decade following Vietnam, that 1975 to 1985 time period, we were looking at ourselves, or they were looking at themselves going, hey, we are not outfitted to win this next war against the Soviet Union. And we looked across the Atlantic Ocean, and we looked at a foe, this big Soviet bear, and the Warsaw Pact, and they had millions and millions of soldiers that were well trained and well equipped. They had airplanes that were technologically advanced. They had surface-air missiles that were going to take out our airplanes. And we looked at our Air Force that had just gotten back from Vietnam, an Air Force in tatters, an Air Force that wasn't ready, that didn't have the right stuff. And we said, wow, if we go to the Soviet Union right now, we're going to be in big trouble. So we better rebuild ourselves. We better modernize. And so that's what they did. That's what they did with the Air Force in the 1980s. And I didn't realize it then, as I was going through High and playing football and running track and playing basketball and chasing girls and cruising up and down Main Street. What I didn't realize was that they were building Air Force for me. All right? They were building Air Force for me. And so when I graduated from the Air Force Academy and I went to pilot training and I got my dream job and I was flying an F-15E Strike Eagle, and that F-15E Strike Eagle was a couple years old. And I just thought that's how it was. That, you know, you get in the Air Force, fly brand new airplanes, and everything's perfect. And, you know, what I didn't realize it was the previous 10 years of modernization efforts, of developing stealth technology, developing things that we take for granted now, like GPS, developing, you know, precision weapons and bombs, developing the ability to fly low altitude at night, all these things that were specifically designed to fight the Soviet Union. We built them. They built them for me. They built them for me and my fellow airmen. And for those of us that have had a 30-year career, to be frank, we've kicked everyone's ass with that stuff for the last 30 years. And there's never, and I've been in a lot of battles, there's never been a battle that I've been into where I once doubted my success or our ability to achieve success. We had every piece of kit that we needed, and it was specifically designed to ensure that we could dominate our adversaries. Well, let me tell you folks, we just got back from about 30 years of conflict in the Middle East. And that Air Force that Ronald Reagan built for us in 1980 is the same Air Force that we have today. And it's my job to be that same individual going, man, there's someone sitting here in Inner Central High School that's going to be coming into the Air Force. And I need to make sure that they have every advantage when they go into battle so that their parents don't have a single worry about their ability to have success in conflict. So that's what I'm doing right now. We're rebuilding the Air Force. We're funding the Air Force. And I don't know if you listened to President Trump's speech at West Point the other day, but we're building an Air Force that can annihilate our enemies, right? And the stuff that we're building, airplanes like an F-47 fighter, a B-21 bomber, swarms of drones, those are the things that I'm developing, and those are the things that we're finding through our analysis are war winning. So trust me when I tell you that the Air Force of our future is going to be just like this Air Force of the future, of the past, and its ability to win. It might not look the same, but we're doing everything we possibly can to ensure the young kids in this audience right now have every tool they need to put America where it needs to be for the future. So, and as I close, I would like to just leave three things with you, if that's all right. I got three requests. What I'd ask is you can continue to support our military like you always have. The men and women who serve deserve your support. I'd ask you to inspire future generations of Hebronites to serve. You know, I am getting the Air Force ready for them, and I'd ask you to continue to be the patriotic citizens rallying around our flag and our Constitution. Freedom isn't free, our nation deserves it. Thank you, and may God bless America.